1. Hello, hello, hello. This is Gresh from the I Am CEO podcast, and I have a very special guest on the show today. I have David Cancel of Drift and author of Conversational Marketing. David, it's awesome to have you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
No problem. Super excited to have you on. And what I want to do is just read a little bit more about David so you can hear about all the awesome things that he's doing. And David is a serial entrepreneur, podcast host of Seeking Wisdom, an angel investor and advisor. He is best known for creating hyper-growth products and product teams at companies such as Drift, HubSpot, Performable, Ghostery, and Compete. David was named the top-ranked CEO by USA Today, has been featured by media outlets such as the New York Times, Forbes, Fortune, Wired, Fast Company, and has guest lectured on entrepreneurship at Harvard, Harvard Business School, MIT, MIT's Sloan School of Management, Bentley, and other universities. David, are you ready to speak to the
Sorry about that. I am super excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem. No problem. Super excited to have you on. So to kick everything off, I wanted to hear a little bit more about what I call your CEO story. What led you to start your business?
Sure. So this is actually my 5th business that I've started. If I go all the way back in time, my parents immigrated to the U.S. and they both worked for themselves, and I kind of grew up in that environment. And I think that had a lot to do with me wanting to start a business. And back in the day, I had no idea what a business was or how to start a business or any of these things. But like 5 companies later, I think I've figured that part out, at least that little part of it out. And I started this business because I basically wanted to fix some of the problems that I think I helped create in the other companies that I had created. And so, trying to right a wrong and bring something new to the market.
That makes perfect sense. And definitely, I think you're doing pretty well if you're 5 companies in. So it's great to hear that you not only were able to solve problems within those companies, but you found other problems that you're of solve too. So yep. I wanted to hear a little bit more about these problems and what you're doing with Drift and how you're helping to solve them.
Sure. So, all of my companies that I've started and been a part of have been basically marketing and sales software of some type or another. Mm-hmm. And what I realized when I was thinking about starting Drift was that those tools that exist, which are most of the tools that we all use today in marketing and sales out there, were really built for this world that doesn't exist anymore. And what I mean by that is that a world where the company has all the control of the sales process and the consumer or the buyer has no control in the sales process. And I think what we observed was that the world had flipped upside down, and that now the customer has all the power and has infinite supply of choice, and they can buy anything, anywhere, 24/7, 365. And so now companies have to change the way that they market and sell to this new reality, and that is the basis of why Drift exists.
Nice. And that definitely is, exactly right in this day and age, especially with all the opportunity and the technology. Mm-hmm. In this day and age, everything's literally at your fingertips. So if you don't like this, you can move on to that. And you're saying that Drift is created in order to combat that.
Exactly. And, the truth is that most companies in the world, although theoretically they may understand this or intellectually they understand this, they haven't changed the way that they market and sell yet. And because all of the tools in the market were built for that old world. And so we're trying to usher in this new shift that has already happened, as you said yourself. Like, it has nothing to do with us. It's already reality, but we're trying to create software that makes it easier for people to make this transition.
Nice. And could you drill a little bit deeper and tell us a little bit how that software is doing, and how, like, somebody who thinks they may be kind of ushering in that technology but may not be doing it as much as they could, sure, how they could be doing it?
Yeah, so if we think about the typical sales process today and marketing process, like, you get people to your website, you make them fill out if it's not e-commerce, which most businesses are not, you make them fill out a form. You send them a bunch of emails, you nurture them. At some point, you decide that this person would be a good fit for your business, and then you get back to that person. But that usually happens days, weeks, sometimes even months later. And again, that worked in a world where you were largely a monopoly or had very few competitors, and so you can control that process. But today's world, you have an infinite number of competitive solutions. And so in today's world, what we do with Drift is say, don't do that. Instead, try to be available 24/7, 365, 7 days a week on your website. And instead of directly into the forum, have a conversation with that person, because you're never going to, if you have salespeople, you've never sold anything until you have had a conversation. So that is the core thing. Instead of putting hurdles in front of them, enable the conversation. And of course, we need to sleep, and we're not available 24/7. So Drift enables and is built with bots so that the bots can have these conversations and can help people while your team is asleep. And but then at the same time, provide you with this 24/7, 365 experience for that buyer.
That makes perfect sense. And it's funny because it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of times FAQs were created because a lot of people have the same questions over and over again, but you don't really have that conversation, that back and forth that I guess Drift provides.
Exactly. You're not getting the context, which is important, about where is that customer, where can I meet them, what is their real question. And FAQs existed for a long time, and they exist today, and they're fine, but FAQs are really driven by deflecting. Right? Again, like forums are deflecting, FAQs are deflecting. So that's about scaling a relationship versus having a conversation, understanding the context, and trying to solve for that customer.
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. And now I wanted to ask you for what I call your secret sauce. And it could be for you or for your organization, but what do you feel kind of sets you apart and makes you unique?
In the market today, a number of things. I mean, we were the first as far as we know in the world, to have those type of bots for sales qualification specifically on the website. And so there are now other companies who have emulated that, but we were first in the market to do that. We have built our entire company around this paradigm and this shift. And so you cannot just tack on a feature or, add something to your product and make it this new thing, because it's a fundamentally different data model. And so you had Salesforce as a CRM, and that's a cloud hosted database paradigm. And then you had new companies come in like Facebook and LinkedIn that use the social graph, which was an entirely new data paradigm. And Salesforce could not take that technology and put it on Salesforce with Chatter or one of their other products and make it LinkedIn or make it Facebook. You're always going to have winners in the categories that emerge. And so this is an entirely new category, entirely new data model. You can't really tack this onto something else. And so you have to build your company around this conversational database idea, and that conversational data being the core of everything.
That makes perfect sense. And it definitely sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not just a kind of a software technical thing. It sounds like it's a core principle for a company and culture that you want to be able to have those conversations and nurture, as you said. So it's also, the technological part, obviously, but also some of the culture as well.
Absolutely. So that's why, and theoretically, when we look at companies, startups should never exist. New entrants in markets should fundamentally never exist. Because if you look at a company, theoretically, they could do the same thing. They could copy they could come to the same conclusion. They can build this thing. They can rejigger their products. But we all know that that's not true. And the reason that new entrants exist and startups exist is because most companies cannot get out of their way, because they've aligned all their incentives within their company to work along the paradigm that they're in and the products that they're in today, and they can't just wholesale shift into a new model. That's why this exists, right? If everything was theoretically perfect and efficient, then new entrants would never exist, and those existing companies would continue to shift and take all of the market share. But we know that's not true.
Absolutely. And that's why the word disruption exists. Definitely. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit, and I wanted to ask you for what I call a CEO hack. And this might be an app, a book, or a habit that you have, or even something that we don't know about Drift, but something that can make you more effective and efficient.
Yeah, I'd say there's a bunch of things. You probably heard everyone's talked about routines and habits and, morning practices and all that. So I won't go into that, but I do think that's important. For me, the most important thing is that I'm an avid or addictive reader or obsessive reader, and so I read a lot. And the trick that I will pass on to the audience is that you don't have to read a book the way you were taught in school, from a table of contents to the end of the book at one go. You can pick up multiple books, and this is what I do. I read multiple books at a time, 3 to 5 books any given time, and I'm bouncing in between those books. As I lose interest in a book, I'll put it down, I'll open up another book, and I will read that, and then I go back or revisit the original book. And what you learn is that, look, every time you read a book, and you can read the same book every few years, and you'll get something different out of it because you're bringing a different context to that reading, right? And so things emerge out of there. The other thing that happens when you read multiple books at once is that those ideas start to associate across each other, and you start to think of new combinations, new patterns, and new synthesis of ideas by reading multiple books at one time. And they can be nonfiction and fiction. They can be totally unrelated, but those ideas kind of pollinate, and you come up with even better ideas.
Absolutely. And it kind of speaks definitely to the evolution of us as people or companies, or where we are in our lives as well, too, because you look at it from a different perspective. And I love that you touched on as well that a lot of times we're kind of indoctrinated, might be the right word, to basically read a book from table of contents and understanding that that's not necessarily the best way to always do it.
Yeah, I probably wasted, at least 20 years of my life because of that. I loved reading as a kid. I hated reading when I was in school because of this way that we were taught and forced to read. And then I came back many years later into my career and rekindled my love for reading once I discovered this idea that I talked about, that there were no hard and fast rules about how to read a book. And now, I can't stop reading all the time. And so I think it's an important thing that people understand that you don't read that way. You're not reading for memorization. You don't have to read from cover to cover. Like if you buy a book, the author is happy because you bought the book. You don't need, and they're getting their commission. They don't need you to read the table of contents and the footnotes and every single piece of the book. You can if you want, but you don't have to read that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And there's no summer school assignment or test at the end. So that always helps you, like we used to have when we were kids.
Totally.
So now I wanted to ask you for what I call a CEO nugget. And this is a word of wisdom or piece of advice, or if you can hop into a time machine, what would you tell your younger business self?
It's probably, I think it's probably what everyone says, which is like, relax, don't take it so hard, but like, don't be too crazy. But, I think it's most advice I find, and I spend a lot of time thinking about advice that I've gotten over time. It sounds trite. It sounds like, we ignore it. And you think like, oh, there must be a more complicated answer to this. And what I realized over time is that that's not true, that the fundamental lessons that you need to learn in life, most of us know before we're even a teenager, early in life, we already know what they are. The problem is that it takes most of us a lifetime to actually learn those lessons, because it's easy to gloss over the simplicity in those lessons, right? Your grandmother, if you spend time with your grandmother when you were a kid, your grandmother probably imparted everything that you need to know in life pretty early in your life, but it takes us years and years and years of resistance and then fighting, and then finally Mother Nature teaching us, either through pain or we get smart in some cases and learn from others, that these simple lessons about, whether it's treating people the way that you want to be treated, whether it's don't being too hard on yourself, and enjoy life. Like, all these things sound trite and sound like greeting cards, but like, they are the most important lessons in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And it always kind of goes in circles, so to speak, because a lot of times the things that you knew and already know the answers to or whatever makes sense, you kind of ignore that, or it gets so noisy in life that you start to think and overthink things. So it's a great reminder for us as CEOs and business owners. And now I wanted to ask you my absolute favorite question, which is the definition of what it means to be a CEO. And we're hoping to have different quote unquote CEOs on this show. So David, what does being a CEO mean to you?
Well, for years I would tell people that it means like then I'm the chief experience officer, right? Experience for all the people, right? Experience for our customers, experience for our team members, experience for our investors, our community. Like, that's really what I spend my time on. And other times, especially earlier in the history of a companies, I would say the CEO is the chief explainer officer. And so I'm kind of in that phase right now with Drift, which is, what I mean by that is that most of the time, as you scale a team and you're bringing a product or a service to market, you spend most of your time explaining, right? And you start to learn like, oh, okay, this is why people who write speeches and politicians and others, like, they repeat simple messages over and over. And as a CEO, you have to that is a lot of what you're doing. You know, whether you're translating for your investors, the public markets, your team members, your customers, you're explaining over and over again. And one of the hardest things that I've had to learn is that I don't like repeating myself naturally, like that. I like saying something once and I kind of think it's obvious. And that is exactly the wrong thing and a wrong way to approach this when you become a CEO.
Absolutely. And it's just like any, marketing or sales, sometimes you have to say it 7, 8, 9,
Yes.
100 times before it actually comes in, and people kind of dictate that and understand it, and it becomes like the gospel, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I didn't believe it. I didn't believe that. Again, another kind of idea that it's taken me many years of pain to figure out, which is I didn't believe that was true. And now I'm like, wow, it is so true.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, David, I truly appreciate your time. What I want to do is pass you the mic, so to speak, just to see if there's anything additional you can let our readers and listeners know. Then, of course, how best they can get a hold of you, get a copy of your book, and hear about all the awesome things you're doing.
So to find me, I'm DCancel on Twitter, Instagram, everything. So I'm pretty easy to find. And we offer free copies of our book. If you go to drift.com, drift.com/book. And, I would say definitely don't take it too hard on yourself. A bunch of CEOs, alphas, listening to this thing. And you don't have to learn everything on your own. Most of my career has been brute force, aka pain. You don't have to do that. You can learn from mentors, you can learn from books, you can learn from other people. Most of what we need to learn in doing this job has been figured out, because most of this job involves people, and people have not evolved. And so the lessons are all there.
Absolutely. Well, I definitely appreciate that. I appreciate your time, and we'll make sure to have the links and your information in the show notes as well. But David, thank you so much. I hope you have a phenomenal rest of the day.
You too. Thank you so much for taking time with me and letting me be on the show.